Emily Longley was born in England in 1994 to Mark and Caroline Longley. 2 years later, her parents had another child, Emily's younger sister Hannah. From early childhood, the girls were very close to each other. They lived in a loving and caring family. When Emily was 9 and Hannah was 7, the family moved to New Zealand. Auckland became their new home. When Emily fell in with the wrong crowd after emigrating to New Zealand, her middle-class parents sent her back to the UK to start a new life with her grandparents. In 2010, Emily flew to England to study at Brockenhurst College. She wanted to get a business degree and dreamed of becoming a model. In England, she lived at her grandparents' house in Bournemouth. Bournemouth, adjacent to Poole in the west, is a town in the county of Dorset, a popular resort on the English Channel coast. When Emily moved to England, her sister Hannah was still at school, and her parents, Mark and Caroline, divorced but maintained a friendly relationship. Emily was a beautiful young woman who attracted much attention. One day, she met 20-year-old Elliot Turner. He made quite an impression on her. Gradually, their communication grew into a romantic relationship. In April 2011, Emily returned to New Zealand to visit her family, whom she had not seen for about 6 months. Her father met her at the airport. She ran up to him and hugged him tightly, saying she missed him very much. Emily had a very close relationship with her father, who loved her madly and missed her smile, laughter, and dirty jokes. The following day, the whole family went to Emily's favorite pizzeria. She told her parents that, apart from studying in college, she was engaged in modeling and made some incredible friends. She also mentioned the man she was dating, 20-year-old Elliot Turner. They had only been dating for a few months, and it seemed to her that she was too young for something serious. "I think I'm going to end it when I go back," she said. Emily spent the next few weeks hanging out with friends and family. She had a wonderful time. No one suspected they would soon lose her. When Emily's flight started boarding, it was hard for her to say goodbye to her family. However, Emily promised she would be back in 5 months. She wanted to see the matches of the Rugby World Cup, which was to begin on September 9th. While texting with her father a few days later, Emily informed him about breaking up with Elliot, but she did not go into details. Elliot behaved strangely after seeing the photos of Emily that she posted on social networks while in New Zealand. There were guys in these photos, and Elliot was very jealous. The son of a wealthy jeweler, Elliot Turner, was 20 years old, and his life seemed carefree. Turner was well known in the local bar and club scene in the Bournemouth and Poole areas and was part of a gang of wealthy young men called The Firm. Called by his friends All Talk Turner because of his boasting, he met Emily in December 2010. The couple enjoyed the high life at the resort and often had fun until late at night, but Turner, who had a history of obsession with women, soon showed signs of jealousy. As a result, their relationship quickly escalated into violent arguments. Some people described him as a person displaying a threatening, aggressive, violent, controlling, and possessive nature. In January 2008, when he was 16, he received a harassment warning letter from the police telling him not to contact his ex-girlfriend after he bombarded her with text messages and emails because she broke up with him. Turner loved being at the center of attention. He didn't need to work for a living. His parents gave him everything he needed. Elliot skillfully manipulated people, including his parents. His life was all about parties, women, alcohol, and illegal substances. He considered himself a man who can do anything he wants. Elliot carried a hammer with him in case anyone tried to contradict him. His friends believed that Turner fancied himself a gangster and wanted to become the one everyone turned to for help. He could come to the bar and buy everyone a drink. Elliot bragged about driving a new Mini Cooper, but it was a gift from his grandmother. He tried to maintain his bad boy image with a series of supposedly streetwise messages on social networking sites, where he often referred to himself as Scarface or God. He didn't lack female attention, but when he met Emily, he became very attached to her. She complimented his image of a successful person, which he worked hard to create. As their relationship developed, Turner started showing his controlling behavior more and more often. He even threatened Emily that he would take her life. In an emotional plea to Turner, Emily wrote a note to him a few months before her death saying, 1. I love you. 2. Don't say you'll kill me. 3. Stop talking about your ex-girlfriends. 4. Stop being so constantly aggressive. Be more cruel, because that is so much more hot and you make me scared because you're so intimidating. When Turner began to show his true face, and when his controlling behavior started to go beyond all reasonable limits, Emily realized that he was not the person she wanted to be with. However, people like Turner don't understand rejection. On the evening of May 6, 2011, Emily was with friends in one of the entertainment venues. Surveillance cameras captured how she came to a nightclub with her friends. That evening, Turner read her Facebook messages and discovered that Emily was dating another man. It pissed him off. He came to the club and started arguing with Emily. This whole story ended with the girl throwing her drink in his face. Turner verbally abused her and threatened her with violence. He didn't like Emily's outfit. He thought it was too revealing. He dismissed the fact that Emily had broken up with him. The man wasn't going to let her go. Elliot ruined her evening, so she decided to leave. Yet, her ex-boyfriend followed her. His friends heard him say, "I will kill her. I will go to prison for it and still be a millionaire. I would do 10 years. It wouldn't bother me." Turner caught up with Emily, somehow persuading her to go to his house. He said he wanted to talk in a more relaxed atmosphere. Elliot Turner lived with his parents. Perhaps that's why Emily went with him. Maybe she thought he would behave more calmly in the presence of his parents. Neighbors saw them go inside the house. The following morning, Anita Turner, Elliot's mother, called the emergency service, saying Emily was not waking up. It was about 9 a.m. Before the arrival of the ambulance, Anita listened to the operator's instructions on how to help Emily. Unfortunately, when the ambulance arrived, the only thing they could do was to state the death of Emily Longley. Anita was an Indonesian citizen who came to the UK to marry Lee Turner. When the couple had a son, they did not deny him anything, which was a big mistake. During her conversation with the emergency service operator, Anita's voice did not sound like the voice of a mother who had just found her son's girlfriend dead. She was too calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. Thousands of miles from England, in New Zealand, Emily's father, Mark, woke up at 2 in the morning and saw a bunch of missed calls from his ex-wife Caroline and younger daughter Hannah. There was also a voice message from Hannah, but Mark could barely make out what she was saying. Then he heard Caroline scream in the background and her words, "Emily is dead." Mark refused to believe it. He called his mother in England. When she answered, his whole world fell apart. His mother was crying hysterically. Moments later, one of the police officers took her phone. "I'm sorry to tell you that your daughter Emily is dead," he said. Mark couldn't believe it. After all, Emily was sitting on his couch and smiling just a week ago. Flying to the UK, the grief-stricken father still refused to believe that his daughter was dead. But unfortunately, it wasn't a dream. The loss of the eldest daughter was a heartbreaking challenge for Emily's parents. The police told them that Emily had died in her sleep. It didn't make any sense. She was young and healthy. The police collected some evidence, but it was unclear what happened to Emily. They had to wait for the autopsy results. Elliot Turner's parents, Anita and Lee, told investigators they had been home all night and had not heard anything suspicious. Elliot publicly mourned Emily by posting photos of them together on his Facebook page. The police had nothing bulletproof to refute the story of Turner and his parents that Emily mysteriously died in her sleep. During the investigation of any death, the main factor is to determine the cause of it. When investigators discover the cause of the victim's death, they understand what they are dealing with and how to conduct an investigation. While waiting for the autopsy results, the investigators found out that a few days before her death, Emily had posted something strange on her Facebook page. "I have a stalker," she added. "Someone just called me and I was like, who's this? And they were like, "You don't know me, but I know everything about you." And I was like, "How did you get my number?" And he was like, "I'll tell you when I see you," and kept asking me out. So I hung up and they won't stop calling, Emily wrote on Thursday, May 5th. At the same time, the police managed to find out that before her death, Emily quarreled with Elliot Turner in front of other nightclub guests. After interviewing Turner's friends, investigators learned that he tried to control Emily's every move, that he found out about her meeting with another man, and most importantly, that Elliot threatened to take her life many times. But his friends did not attach any importance to this, believing that these were just words with which Turner strengthened his image of a gangster. The autopsy did not give an exact cause of Emily's death. However, experts mentioned it could be strangulation, and one of them said, "The physical findings are entirely consistent with pressure being applied to the neck." Investigators believed that one of the Turner family members could be involved in Emily's death, so they decided to install listening devices in their house. The police were hoping to find out if they were hiding anything, and they were right to do that. They heard Elliot instructing his mother on how to behave with the police and what she needed to say. His father, Lee Turner, seemed to be the only person who understood what he was doing was wrong, but eventually, he submitted to the will of his son and wife. While listening to the recordings, investigators also heard what happened to Emily Longley. Elliot Turner admitted that he caused her death. They arrested Elliot Turner a week after Emily's death. He, of course, denied his guilt. His lawyers tried to challenge the authenticity of those audio recordings. However, having studied all aspects of this case, the judge allowed the prosecution to use the recordings as evidence. Not knowing the police were listening, Elliot admitted that he felt angry every day and that no one had ever pissed him off as much as Emily. During the trial in May 2012, his lawyer stated that their client acted in self-defense. Elliot Turner said that the quarrel in his bedroom turned violent and he had to grab Emily by the neck. He said he didn't strangle her. He just found her dead in his bed the next morning. During the second day of the trial, Turner told the court that he was disgusted by his actions that night. Allegedly, after finding Emily dead, he wrote a letter to his mother saying how ashamed he was and that he was leaving for Spain. One can assume Elliot Turner was going to leave the country on the day of Emily's death, but changed his mind for some reason. When the police arrived at Turner's home after the 999 call, they saw packed bags. Elliot's passport was in his pocket. He admitted in court that he had threatened Emily and felt upset and deceived the night before her death after seeing false emails on her phone saying he had smashed her face into a table. When describing the fight they had before her death, he mentioned Emily started beating him with her hands and feet. He tried to calm her down before giving up and throwing her a 20-pound note for a cab. He said, "She just ignored me at first. Then, 5 seconds later, she just went crazy. I had never seen Emily get to that point of rage. I didn't know what to do. She would not stop. I kept repeating myself, 'Stop it, calm down.' At that point, I grabbed her by the neck using my right hand." Defense counsel Anthony Dunn asked, "Why did you do that?" Turner replied, "To stop her going nuts. I did not know what to do. My right hand made contact with her neck." When the defense counsel asked how hard he grabbed her, Turner replied, "I would not say very hard, but it was quite hard. I grabbed her and pushed her down onto the bed. I pressed down on her neck when she was in the lying down position." He said he held her there for 5 or 6 seconds, then let go and stormed out of the room. When asked if he intended to kill Emily, Turner replied, "No." He said he thought Emily had gone to sleep. Allegedly, he realized Emily was dead only when she did not wake up the following morning. In an interview with the Herald newspaper, Emily's father, Mark, spoke about how hard it was for him to lose his daughter. "Here is the thing about death. It sucks. It doesn't matter if it is your child, your partner, or your 99-year-old grandmother. It sucks. That a person is there one day and not the next, well, it is not something we can deal with easily. All anniversaries are hard. Birthdays are hard. Christmas is hard. Easter is also tough because it was the last time I really spent time with her," Mark Longley said. He said the heaviest part was that he would never see the woman she could have become. I miss seeing the life she was denied unfold. We had a brief glimpse of the woman she was becoming, and I was so proud of her. I am her father, and of course am biased, but the world really was a better place with her in it. It was certainly a lot more fun. At the trial, they portrayed Elliot Turner as a spoiled, wealthy kid whose parents wanted to help him escape punishment. The court heard he was given the run of the family's home in the affluent Queen's Park area of Bournemouth, where he would hold parties for his middle-class friends. Described as wild by his father Lee, he was given his own living space in the converted garage of his parents' house so he could come and go without disturbing them. It was in his room, which had its own mini bar, that he strangled Emily on his bed. The police examined the computers seized from Turner's and found the following search queries: death by strangulation and how to avoid punishment for a crime. The main motive of the crime was jealousy. The court heard testimony from Luke Ashford, who spent the night with Emily. As already mentioned, Elliot Turner found out about it. Even while in custody, Turner boasted that the jury would believe his twisted story that Emily had attacked him, and he had acted in self-defense when he strangled her in a fit of jealousy. In letters from his prison cell to his friends, he said he would soon drive a new Range Rover and move to Spain. He planned to sell the rights to his story and live a fashionable life. However, the jury quickly shattered his illusions when they found him guilty. On May 22, 2012, the court sentenced Elliot Turner to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. Announcing the verdict, Mrs. Justice Dobbs described Turner as a man of striking arrogance. She said, "Emily was a lovely, kind, fun-loving girl who brought a ray of sunshine to those she touched. That light has been extinguished suddenly and needlessly by you. You did not love her, she was just a trophy. The relationship, if it can be called that, was all about you. It was about control. Control you carried out using aggression and threats. You can put away thoughts of champagne, Bentleys, and girls and concentrate on the reason you are serving a life sentence." Mrs. Justice Dobbs also sentenced Turner to 9 months to run concurrently for perverting the course of justice. But Elliot Turner wasn't the only person on trial. His parents, Anita and Lee, whom Turner used for cash to fund his lavish partying, loved their son so much they tried to cover his crime. Lee destroyed Turner's confession letter, and Anita took the jacket from the bedroom where the letter allegedly was. His mother even postponed calling an ambulance so her son could cover his tracks and let the family come up with a convincing story for the police. When asked why she did not call an ambulance, Anita Turner replied that she did not believe Emily was dead. Under cross-examination, they asked her if she thought Emily had ruined her son's life. After a pause of 6 seconds, she replied, "No." In the recording, Lee asked Anita whether they had done the right thing. "We've done the right thing," Anita replied. Both 51-year-old Anita Turner and 54-year-old Lee Turner were found guilty of perverting the course of justice and sentenced to 27 months in prison. Mrs. Justice Linda Dobbs said, "The two of you chose to fight the case, showing little remorse. Mr. Turner, you claimed you didn't know the contents of the letter when you destroyed it, but the fact it was burning on your conscience is quite evident from your anguished tone of voice on the tape." Released in 2013 after serving half of their sentence, they still live in the house where Emily Longley died. Emily's dad, Mark, broke down as he spoke about the verdicts after the case. Supported by former wife Caroline and daughter Hannah, he said, "What we have heard over these 5 weeks has shocked us and disgusted us. That a man so evil like Turner could treat a gentle and loving girl like Emily so violently is beyond belief. We are so proud of the fact that she had come halfway around the world to cause a better life for herself. This is a life Turner decided to end." Mark said there was a lot of talk about Turner's boasting and that no one had taken his threats seriously until it was too late. He added, "Even his mother did not take him seriously when he texted her to tell her he was going to break Emily's neck." Perhaps if someone had taken his threats seriously, Emily might be with us today. I hope Turner suffers every day in prison for what he has done. In October 2020, the press reported that Elliot Turner's cellmates had beaten him in prison. It happened after he hung up photos of Emily in his cell and boasted of receiving letters from female fans. Some of his cellmates attacked him after he said he would soon return to his life full of champagne, Bentleys, and birds. In 5 years, Turner will have the right to apply for early release from prison. One can only hope that common sense will prevail and that the parole board will make the right decision regarding a person who still has no remorse for his actions. According to psychologists, most often teenagers commit offenses for 3 reasons: the desire to assert themselves and gain authority among their peers, alcohol addiction or addiction to illegal drugs, but most importantly, a sense of impunity. Even for the most serious crimes, minors often receive minimal punishment because their young age is taken into account. In our story today, a schoolgirl named Mackenzie Shirilla became the perpetrator of a terrible tragedy that took 2 lives at once. However, the girl herself did not feel remorse for her crime, and at the trial stated that she could do almost anything while staying alive, but she does not consider herself cool. Mackenzie repeatedly changed her testimony, writing off everything on a lapse in memory, and apparently, until the last moment was confident that she would get away with it. But the verdict of the judge literally dumbfounded the young criminal and her mother, so desperately defending her daughter. But let's get to the bottom of this. Who is Mackenzie Shirilla? Mackenzie Shirilla was born in August 2004 in the quiet town of Strongsville, Ohio, and was the 3rd child in the family. Her parents, John Shirilla and Natalie Stevens, tried to bring up their heirs in love and care, to give them a good education and encourage all endeavors. The youngest daughter was a family favorite. She was forgiven many pranks from childhood, and even serious misdemeanors often got away with it. Mackenzie grew up capricious, demanding, and selfish girl. She was used to the fact that parents always do as she requires, and was also confident in her own impunity no matter what she did. Classmates and teachers of the girl noted that in childhood she was quite a nice and open child, but with age, her character and behavior began to deteriorate. The girl threw real tantrums. If something went wrong, she easily lost her temper, behaved impudently and impatiently, swore, and could even get into a fight. Mackenzie did not consider anyone's opinion but her own. Her word should always be the last, and she put her own interests above all else. In adolescence, the character of the girl became simply unbearable, but her parents did not see anything terrible in this, believing that her daughter has a transitional age and she should be treated with understanding and patience. However, bad character was far from the worst of all the troubles. In high school, Mackenzie was addicted to alcohol, as well as sometimes dabbled in illegal drugs, but she got away with it. Often the girl's actions were reckless and carried a direct threat not only to her, but also to the people around her. Parents still did not notice, or simply did not want to notice the obvious problem. Like many of her peers, Mackenzie was a big fan of social media and literally never let her smartphone out of her hands. She often posted provocative pictures of herself smoking or drinking alcohol on her account, and she left equally provocative comments on them. Mackenzie's friends were just like her. Together they vandalized, organized pogroms, fights, sometimes stole, and several times came to the attention of the police. However, the young people were treated only with warnings and educational talks, which strengthened their belief in their own impunity. Dominique Rousseau, a young man named Dominic Rousseau, was also a native of Strongsville. He was born in September 2001 and was the 4th of 7 children to his parents, Frank and Christine Rousseau. The boy was raised with 3 brothers and 3 sisters, with whom he was always very close. Dominic studied well in school, from childhood years actively engaged in sports, and tried to lead a healthy lifestyle. Despite the fact that he grew up in a large family, neither he himself nor any of his brothers or sisters was not deprived of parental love, attention, and care. Spouses Frank and Christine were moderately strict with their children, but at the same time promoted their all-round development. Dominic always had a lot of friends. He was used to being in the center of attention and became the soul of any company. The young man had a bright and quite attractive appearance, was trim and interesting, so he also had a lot of admirers from a young age. However, he himself tried to avoid fleeting romances, emphasizing serious and promising relationships. After graduating from high school, Russo became a student at a local university, choosing the specialization producer of performing arts. He dreamed of linking his life with music and one day becoming a famous music producer. In addition, the talented and versatile Dominic wrote and performed songs himself. By the age of 20, the guy already had his own small business. He bought a car and rented a separate apartment in a good neighborhood. At the same time, he continued to play sports and was considered one of the best students at the university. First love. Dominic and Mackenzie met for the first time when the girl studied in the graduating class. It happened at one of the parties in the company of mutual friends, and this accidental meeting became fatal for both of them. Young people were complete opposites of each other, and opposites are known to attract. A handsome, curly-haired young man, well-versed in music, immediately attracted Mackenzie's attention. He was radically different from the guys she usually socialized with. He was educated, well-mannered, interesting, and could easily hold a conversation on any topic. Mackenzie herself had a striking appearance and slim figure, dressed well, and knew how to make the right impression. She turned on all her charm to draw the attention of the guy she liked, and she managed to achieve the desired rather quickly. In the fall of 2021, the couple began dating, and almost immediately each of them introduced the chosen one to their parents. But if Mackenzie's parents were delighted with her choice and considered Dominic a brilliant couple for their daughter, the parents of the guy had mixed feelings about his passport. On the one hand, the girl looked sweet, innocent, and tried to make a good impression on them. But on the other hand, something in her immediately alerted Frank and Christine Russo. Friends and family members of Cheryl were sure that Mackenzie, for the first time in her life, really fell in love, and sincerely hoped that the relationship with the chosen one will positively affect her character and behavior. Then no one could not even guess what tragedy would end this youthful romance. The couple began to appear everywhere together, holding hands and openly demonstrating their tender feelings for each other. So soon, the whole small town knew about the relationship. Those who knew Mackenzie well sincerely felt sorry for her boyfriend, but most just happy for them. What was wrong with her? Soon Dominic began to notice oddities in his girlfriend's behavior, her defiant antics and desire to make everyone around her do only what she wants. At first, he did not focus too much attention on it, writing off everything on the young age and the desire to attract attention. The young people made plans for their future together, and even planned to get married as soon as Mackenzie turned 18. They also planned to leave their native provincial town, and together go to conquer a major metropolis, ideally, New York. There before Dominic would open a lot of opportunities to build a brilliant career in the music industry and fully reveal his talent. But as time went on, Mackenzie's behavior became more and more alarming, and sometimes even frightened the guy. She demanded from her boyfriend that he did only what she wanted, and if he did not agree with her in something, she made scandals, threw tantrums, and behaved like a little capricious child. At first, Dominic tried to translate everything into a joke, but soon realized that this is the true face of his chosen one. In public, she was still trying to hold on, but being alone with her boyfriend spewed on him the whole storm of his emotions, and sometimes even pounced on him with fists. Mackenzie's behavior became more and more aggressive, and at some point, the young man decided that he had enough. He suggested that she take a pause in the relationship and sort out her feelings. But upon hearing this, Mackenzie had a public showdown in front of their mutual friends. She screamed, threatened Dominic that she would kill him if he left her, threatened to burn down his house and wreck his car. But by doing so, she only made him feel more confident that he was doing the right thing by ending this toxic and unrewarding relationship. Obsessive stalking. Mackenzie had no intention of letting her boyfriend go, and at first she acted as if nothing had happened. She continued to called him to various parties and other events, as well as exhibited in social networks of their joint photos, accompanying them with posts with declarations of love. When Dominic firmly told her that everything is over between them, she literally went mad with anger and rage. Mackenzie went to his house almost daily and shouted all sorts of nasty things, insults and threats under his windows. She called him from different numbers, left messages on his answering machine, wrote on social media and emailed him. Mackenzie then swore in love and offered to try to start all over again, then again began to insult and threats. Russo was confused. He simply did not know how to react to such behavior, because he had never encountered such behavior. He tried talking, tried to ignore the former lover, and a couple of times even recorded her threatening tantrums on his phone. It got to the point that Sharilla, seeing the ex-boyfriend on the street or in another public place, began to scream and insult him in front of passers-by. She turned Dominic's life into a real nightmare, but he still hoped that a little more time would pass and she would leave him alone, switching to someone else. One day, in front of witnesses, Mackenzie declared that it was easier for her to kill Dominic than to let him go. Mackenzie said that if he didn't come back to her, no one would have him, and she would take care of it. The young man did not take these words seriously, although those around him realized that Mackenzie was not joking. Among the most frequent threats from the mouth of the schoolgirl were promises to hit and run over the guy with a car, as well as to put him in the car and drive off a cliff or stop on the railroad in front of a train rushing at them. Each option sounded terrifying, and each of them Mackenzie described in detail, as if she had planned it all out long ago and was just waiting for the right moment. An unexpected reconciliation. When Mackenzie realized that threats and insults would not help her to get Dominic back, but only distanced him, she decided to change her tactics. Mackenzie became sweet and charming again, stopped pressuring and harassing her ex-boyfriend, and instead tried her best to pretend that she realized her mistakes and wanted to change for the better. She talked about the upcoming enrollment, asked to help her choose a university, and also claimed that she had gotten smart, and most of all was now concerned about the final exams. Such changes pleasantly surprised Dominic. He, in spite of everything, still had tender feelings for the former girlfriend and decided out of kindness to help her with university enrollment. Therefore, they again began to see each other and communicate. Gradually, the couple became close again. Dominic began to invite Mackenzie on dates, sought to spend all his free time with her, and believed that she had changed, matured, became more serious and responsible. He did not notice how he fell in love with her again, and all the former offenses remained somewhere in the past. However, this time the young people were in no hurry to announce to all friends and acquaintances about their reunion. Their meetings were more like secret dates, where they just enjoyed each other's company, avoiding the close attention of others. When Dominic's own brother Angelo learned about what was happening, he suggested that nothing good would come of it, but the young man in love did not heed his words. A devious plan. While Dominic naively rejoiced at being reunited with his girlfriend and the changes he thought had happened to her, Mackenzie herself hatched a terrifying plan of reprisal against the young man. She was so fascinated by the idea of a car and a spectacular car crash that she began to work out this scenario in detail. In her free time, she spent hours driving around the city, choosing a place suitable for the realization of her plan. However, there were no high and steep cliffs nearby, and going out on the tracks while waiting for a train seemed to her an unreliable idea. One day, Sharilla drove into a nearby industrial area, a fairly secluded place with no cameras on the way, and very few cars in the area. The schoolgirl's attention was drawn to a huge brick wall, and her sick imagination immediately conjured up a new, no less horrible plan. She decided that if she accelerated to the maximum possible speed and crashed into the wall, it would be no less spectacular than falling off a cliff into an abyss. It should be noted that initially Mackenzie planned to die together with her lover, so that their story was retold by all the inhabitants of the city. She even told her best friend about it, but her friend simply did not believe in the seriousness of her intentions, because Mackenzie had visited such delusional ideas before, but everything was limited to empty conversations. A terrible realization of the plan and an accidental victim. At the end of July 2022, just a week before her coming of age, Mackenzie suggested to Dominic that they go to an upcoming party hosted by their mutual friends. It would be a good opportunity to have fun, to unwind, and to let everyone know that they were back together and loved each other dearly. The young man readily agreed. He still didn't feel threatened by Mackenzie and believed in the sincerity of her feelings and intentions. The event was scheduled for Saturday, July 30th. Dominique and Mackenzie appeared in the middle of the party, holding hands, which immediately attracted the attention of those present. They looked happy, smiled, and openly showed affectionate feelings for each other. Friends were sincerely pleased with their reunion and noted that they are a very beautiful and harmonious couple. All evening and all night, the young people had fun, willingly photographed and without shyness, kissed in front of everyone. But no one even guessed what a terrible tragedy would end this party. The couple drank a little, however, like everyone else at the event, but Mackenzie, secretly from everyone, took a dose of illegal drugs, so to speak, for courage, so as not to change his mind, and at the last moment did not hit the brakes. In the morning, Russo and Sharilla said goodbye to everyone and headed for the car, but then a friend of the guy, Davian Flanagan, followed them and asked them to give him a ride home. Mackenzie tried to object, saying they had plans of their own, but Dominic saw no problem with giving his friend a ride. Not wanting to fight, arouse suspicion, or change plans, Mackenzie agreed, signing Davian's death warrant. Despite her lover's objections, Mackenzie got behind the wheel of the car. Her boyfriend sat next to her in the passenger seat, and her friend sat behind him. The car started and slowly pulled away from the party venue, heading out on its most recent trip. On the main street, Mackenzie drove quietly, keeping to the speed limit and trying not to draw attention to herself. At a stoplight, she stopped, though the road was empty. Mackenzie once again considered her plan, while her passengers dozed off. She later claimed that she wanted to die in the accident, but the perpetrator was obviously lying because she had fastened her seatbelt during the last stop, while her passengers remained unbuckled. When the light turned green, she drove off, quickly picking up speed, and then took a sharp turn onto a poorly lit secondary road leading into an industrial area. Obviously, the guys didn't immediately realize what was going on, if at all. It was as if the devil himself had possessed the driver. The car accelerated to top speed, but Mackenzie continued to press hard on the gas pedal, steering the car into a blank brick wall. A bystander and a miraculous rescue. There wasn't a soul in the industrial area early Sunday morning, so no one saw the accident or rushed to help. Only one woman who lived on the outskirts, not far from the scene of the accident, heard the bang and was not too lazy to go outside to see what was the matter. She saw smoke, and when she got closer, she realized that there had been a car crash, after which she ran back inside to call emergency services. Medics arrived at the scene about half an hour after the accident, but the two guys in the car could not be helped. They died on the spot. The girl behind the wheel was alive. She was saved by her seatbelt and airbags. Mackenzie was unconscious, and her legs were trapped in the mangled car, but she was breathing, and her pulse was clearly palpable, giving hope that she would survive. She opened her eyes several times during the process of being released from the car, but was obviously unaware of what was going on around her. Mackenzie was immediately sent to the hospital, where she was diagnosed with a number of fractures and internal organ damage. Blood tests showed that she was under the influence of alcohol and drugs. However, according to the doctor, perhaps that is what prevented her from dying from painful shock while help was on the way. Investigation, leads, and confession. Initially, the police, having received the results of Mackenzie's tests, assumed that she, being under the influence of illegal substances, simply did not realize what she was doing and perhaps tried to drive through the wall or did not see any obstacles in her way. In favor of this version was the lack of braking distance. It was not possible to talk to Sharilla herself because she was unconscious in the intensive care unit after a complex operation. However, she soon came to her senses and, realizing what she had done, began to sob and pour out her soul to the doctor on duty. She admitted that she purposely drove into the wall at a great speed because she wanted to kill her boyfriend and originally planned to die with him. Mackenzie also added that Davian was an accidental victim due to his own obsession because he asked to go with them. The doctor did not take the patient's rambling story seriously, deciding that it was a delusional state resulting from anesthesia and painkillers, as well as guilt over the death of a loved one. and when the police were allowed to talk to the recovering Mackenzie, she suddenly changed her testimony completely. Now Mackenzie claimed that she remembered almost nothing about the events of that night because she took alcohol and illegal substances. According to the girl, she had a lapse in memory after she got behind the wheel, and how Davienne was in the car, she has no idea. However, the facts were to the contrary. The surveillance cameras were able to track the first part of the route the car had taken, and the footage clearly showed that Mackenzie was driving slowly, and according to the rules, until she suddenly turned onto a road leading to an industrial zone. Moreover, it turned out that Mackenzie had driven the entire route both ways several days earlier, and her car had been seen there at various times by at least a dozen witnesses. Back to normal. After being discharged from the hospital, Mackenzie recovered quickly enough and tried to get back to her old, carefree life. She had no remorse and was confident that she could get away with it. Mackenzie was once again active on social media, meeting with friends and making plans for the future. In September, she decided to go to a concert of her favorite band playing in a neighboring city. At that time, the bones of her legs had not yet fully fused, but this did not stop her, and she appeared on the concert stage in a wheelchair. At the same time, she wore bright makeup, dressed provocatively, took selfies with friends, and posted them on her account. In October, when Sharilla was on her feet, she went to a Halloween celebration dressed up in a pre-made costume. Mackenzie lived life to the fullest and even made new acquaintances, but on November 4th, 2022, she was taken into custody. Trial and sentencing. It took the investigation just over 3 months to gather the necessary evidence and proof to bring the case to trial. Mackenzie was charged with premeditated aggravated double murder and possession and use of a controlled substance that was found in her pocket and detected in her blood. The defendant changed her testimony several times, first citing a lapse in memory, and then, when her friend testified in court as a witness, to whom she revealed her plan, Mackenzie changed tactics, saying that she wanted to die with her lover. But even here there were immediately discovered inconsistencies, because she had previously fastened herself with a seatbelt. On August 21st, 2023, Sharilla was found guilty of all charges. However, an important nuance was taken into account, namely, at the time of the crime, she was not yet 18 years old. It was 5 days before her majority, so she was tried as a minor. Under state law, she was entitled to at least 2 consecutive sentences of 15 years for each murder, without parole. But because of her young age, she was allowed to serve the 2 sentences concurrently, meaning she would be eligible for parole in 15 years. By then, Mackenzie would be 33 years old. Both sides were unhappy with the court's decision. Family members of the deceased young people said they would seek a review of the case in order to increase the punishment, and parents and Mackenzie's lawyer, on the contrary, considered the sentence too harsh and filed an appeal. However, the judge left the sentence unchanged, noting that he did not believe that Sharilla would leave prison after 15 years. The defendant herself, in his opinion, did not repent for the evil she had committed, behaved arrogantly and even insolently towards the court. But now she will have enough time to seriously consider her heinous act. In the quiet, mundane life sometimes lie the most extraordinary and harrowing stories. The name of Velma Barfield forever changed the narrative of crime and punishment in the United States. Her life story reads like a tragedy that challenges our perception of evil. Known to many as the death row grandma, she became the first woman executed by lethal injection in the United States, the first woman to be executed after the death penalty's reinstatement in 1976, and also the first woman executed since 1962. But how did a wife, mother, and grandmother, once cherished and loved by those who knew her, transform into one of the most notorious figures in criminal history? Born in a time of economic despair, in the shadow of the Great Depression, Velma Margie Barfield came into the world on October 29, 1932, in Eastover, North Carolina, but was raised near Fayetteville. The second of 9 children, she witnessed a constant battle against poverty from the early age. In rural North Carolina, where life was governed by the rising and setting of the sun, Velma's family toiled on their small tobacco and cotton farm. Velma's father, Murphy Bullard, was a man worn down by the hardships of farm life. His temper was as volatile as the weather that dictated their fortunes. Velma claimed he was physically and sexually abusive to her and her sisters. However, other relatives disputed this. Velma's mother, Lily Bullard, bore the brunt of her husband's frustrations. In their world, love was a luxury they could hardly afford, leaving Velma and her siblings to navigate a childhood marked by emotional absence and the ever-present threat of violence. At a young age, Velma observed the financial differences between herself and her peers. That's when her first criminal activity started. She initially took small amounts of cash from her father to buy little things that she saw her classmates enjoying. Her petty thefts escalated to taking $80 from an elderly neighbor. When her father discovered that, he beat her severely, and Velma stopped stealing for the remainder of her childhood. Raised in a Christian household, young Velma found solace in the pages of her Bible, clinging to faith in the turmoil of her home life. This early introduction to religion was a constant amidst chaos. Yet, as she transitioned to adolescence, the psychological scars left by her upbringing would shape the woman she would later become. The world around was convulsed by World War II. The war, though distant, exacerbated the hardships faced by her family and deepened the fractures within. Velma, like many of her generation, was forced to grow up quickly. Her dreams and aspirations were often overshadowed by the pressing needs of survival and duty to family. Yet it was during this time that her resilience and tenacity began to shine through, qualities that would define her in both commendable and tragic ways. As Velma stepped into early adulthood, her desire for a life beyond the confines of her home grew stronger. She dreamed of escape. At the age of 17, she dropped out of school. The search for love and stability led Velma into the arms of Thomas Burke, a union that promised freedom, but instead brought new hardships. By 19, she had 2 children, a son, Ron, and a daughter, Kim. The family lived happily in Parkton, North Carolina, for over 15 years. Velma's life with Thomas seemed a hard-earned escape from the poverty and violence of her childhood. Everything changed in 1965 when Thomas got into a serious car crash and suffered head injuries. To cope with the intense pain and headaches caused by his injuries, he became a heavy drinker and drug user. His struggle with alcohol mirrored the demons of Velma's father, reigniting the traumas of her past. The cycle of abuse and neglect she vowed never to repeat began to encroach upon her own family. It was during these turbulent years that Velma's resilience was put to the ultimate test. The pressures of an unhappy marriage, the responsibilities of motherhood, and the patterns of her past weighed heavily on her soul. Velma started a job at a textile factory, but soon had to quit due to health problems. She underwent an urgent hysterectomy, which left her feeling insecure about her femininity. After the surgery, she suffered from debilitating back pain and turned to prescription drugs. What began as a means to cope soon spiraled into addiction that eroded her judgment and set the stage for the tragedies to come. Her journey was not a plunge, but a gradual descent, each step marked by an increasing desperation to maintain the illusion of control. On April 4, 1969, Velma had a fierce argument with her husband. Later that day, when she and the children were away, the house caught fire. Thomas, who remained inside, died from smoke inhalation, and the house was burned to the ground. Velma and the kids moved in with her parents. A few months after her husband's death, Velma started dating a widower, Jennings Barfield. They married in August 1970. One day, the couple had an argument, after which Jennings became mysteriously ill. On March 21, 1971, he died of a heart attack. Velma moved into her parents' home again. Soon after that, her father died of lung cancer. In the summer of 1974, her mother suffered severe stomach pain and was taken to the hospital. As she got better, she returned home. In August 1974, a man Velma was dating died in a car accident. On December 30th of the same year, her mother was taken to the hospital again with similar symptoms of a severe stomach illness. Doctors couldn't help her this time, nor could they diagnose her illness, and she died after 2 hours. No autopsy was performed. As mysterious deaths around Velma continued, her son, Ronnie Burke, said, "It's the saddest thing, but it seems like everybody my mother ever gets close to dies." How could the good Lord allow this to happen to a faithful Christian like Velma Barfield? The financial strain of her addiction led to another unethical decision, forging checks to sustain her growing needs. But deceit has its price, and the trust within the community began to fray. Velma found herself trapped in a web of her own making. In 1975, she was convicted of 7 counts of writing bad checks and sentenced to 6 months in prison. However, she was released after serving 3 months. Upon her release in 1976, Velma took a job as a caretaker for the elderly. Initially, she worked for 94-year-old Montgomery Edwards and his 84-year-old wife Dolly in Lumberton, North Carolina. Montgomery fell ill and died on January 29, 1977. A few weeks later, in February, Dolly developed symptoms of a stomach illness similar to those of Velma's mother and died on March 1st. Velma then started looking after 76-year-old Record Lee, who had broken her leg. On June 4, 1977, Lee's husband, John Henry, began to suffer severe pains in his stomach and chest. Doctors diagnosed his condition as a severe stomach virus. He died later that month. Later, in 1977, Velma moved in with her boyfriend Roland Stewart Taylor, a relative of Dolly Edwards. He was a widower and tobacco farmer. One day, they were attending a Pentecostal revival meeting in Cumberland County. Suddenly, Stewart complained of severe stomach pain. He was taken to the hospital, where he died after a few days. The search for truth begins in the quietest of ways: a question, a doubt, a pressing need for answers. Suspicion grew in the hearts of those who had watched Stewart's health decline under mysterious circumstances. It was their persistence that first brought the authorities to Velma's doorstep, initiating a chain of events that would lead to shocking revelations. An autopsy was ordered. The investigation into Stewart Taylor's death was methodical. Each test, each interview, each piece of evidence added another layer of suspicion around Velma. In the world of criminal investigations, breakthroughs often come with a faint clue, a moment of intuition, a connection previously unseen. For the team pursuing justice for Stewart Taylor and the other victims, it came in the form of forensic evidence. Arsenic became the linchpin in unraveling the mystery, traces of which were found in Stewart's system. Before the autopsy results were declared, Lumberton police received an anonymous phone call, reportedly from Velma's sister, who said that Velma had poisoned Taylor and others. Subsequently, Velma was arrested on charges of murdering Stewart Taylor. After her arrest, the body of Jennings Barfield was exhumed, and traces of arsenic were found. The unraveling of Velma's carefully constructed lies began. The art of interrogation is delicate, a push and pull between investigator and suspect. Each question a probe into the darkest corners of the human heart. For Velma, the questions posed by her interrogators mirrored the ones she had long avoided within herself. It was in this room, under the weight of evidence and the scrutiny of the law, that the walls she had built to separate her actions from her conscience could no longer hold as the truth clawed its way to the surface. In search of solace, Velma turned to a spiritual advisor. It was in this desperate hope for redemption that she found the strength to confront her past. For her, the path to confession was a journey back to her soul. With a voice tinged with regret, Velma began to speak. A torrent of truths, long dammed by fear, shame, and denial, flowed forth. Her confession became a source of deep, lasting pain for her own family, who were unwittingly caught in her web of deceit. The woman they loved and the horrible crimes she committed were now inseparably linked, challenging their notions of forgiveness and the very foundations of their understanding of right and wrong. She confessed to poisoning Montgomery and Dolly Edwards, John Henry Lee, her mother Lillian, and her boyfriend Stewart Taylor. Despite the fact that arsenic was found in Jennings Barfield's body, Velma denied killing him. The motive for the murders was stealing money from her victims to support her clandestine addiction to prescription drugs. She had also taken out a loan in her mother's name. Each of her tragic choices, made under the influence of pain, had a devastating impact on her destiny and the people around her. Faced with the threat of exposure, Velma took a step that irrevocably altered the course of her life. The path from one crime to another can often be a slippery slope. She found herself repeating the unthinkable. Every time, Velma went to her victims' funerals and seemed to sincerely mourn their loss. The the burden of her secret pushed her further into isolation. Yet, the resilient human psyche, adept at self-preservation, often takes refuge in justification to shield itself from the unbearable truth and finds ways to rationalize even the darkest deeds. Every time Velma stole money from her victims, then poisoned them as they got suspicious. To the outside world, she remained a devout churchgoer, a seemingly caring nurse, and a loving family member. But her moral compass, once guided by faith, now veered into a realm of denial, caught in a constant struggle between the remnants of her conscience and the overwhelming desire to escape the consequences of her actions. She was forging checks on her boyfriend Stuart Taylor's account. Presumably, he discovered that. So she mixed an arsenic-based rat poison into his beer and tea, determined to maintain her secret at any cost. At the trial, Velma's defense pleaded insanity, but this was not accepted. She appeared cold and uncaring. She laughed at the prosecutor and even gave the district attorney a round of applause after his closing speech. The prosecution painted a picture of Velma not as the church-going grandmother she purported to be, but as a calculating murderer driven by darkness. She was the architect of her own fate, and her actions deserved the utmost penalty. The defense, in turn, sought to humanize her, portraying her not as a monster, but as a troubled soul ensnared by addiction, abuse, and circumstances beyond her control, highlighting her mental health struggles as a mitigating factor in her crimes. In the world of law and order, the truth is often more complex than it appears, inseparable from human emotions. Although she eventually confessed to 6 murders, she was convicted only of the first-degree murder of Stuart Taylor in December 1978. The trial jury found aggravating circumstances and sentenced her to death. For the victims' families, the verdict was an acknowledgement of their irreplaceable loss. A designated holding area for female death row prisoners did not exist at the time, and Velma was the only female death row inmate in North Carolina. So, she was imprisoned at Central Prison in Raleigh, in an area for escape-prone prisoners and prisoners with mental illnesses. Subsequently, a unit for female death row inmates was established at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women. While on death row, Velma was off the drugs and expressed remorse for the years that the pills had blurred her judgment and destroyed her moral compass. In the solitude of her cell, she began the arduous process of confronting her past. The nights were long, the faces of her victims haunted her dreams, and the silence served as a backdrop for her thoughts and regrets. It was during these moments of reflection that Velma faced the full magnitude of her actions, the lives she had taken, and the pain she had caused. Her conversations with the prison chaplain were not just about seeking forgiveness from a higher power, but about understanding the nature of atonement and the painstaking process of forgiving oneself. In jail, Velma confessed that she had never been a true Christian. Her Christianity had been a matter of form and gesture. Then, finally, while waiting for her trial, she genuinely opened her heart to Jesus and received forgiveness and salvation. She wrote in her autobiography, "All my life I was weighted down by my sins because I couldn't do better. It never occurred to me that Jesus really did pay the price, that Jesus alone bore the extreme punishment, death, for my sins, not just for my good neighbors. And even more glorious, Jesus is willing to be my friend even now. I can talk to him and he will listen." She became a devout Christian and spent her 6 final years ministering to other inmates. Velma, in her own way, became a source of support to them. Her involvement in spiritual activities offered her a sense of community and belonging that had eluded her for much of her life. Her extensive participation in the Christian community led to a campaign to have her sentence commuted from death to life imprisonment. She wrote letters to Governor Jim Hunt telling him that her born-again Christian faith should be considered as a mitigating factor. She received support from many Christians across the United States, including evangelists Billy and Ruth Graham. Ruth kept in touch with Velma by mail. Her victims' families, however, considered Velma's conversion a fraud and a ploy to save her life. To them, she was a woman who had killed their loved ones. Velma remained a loving mother and a caring grandmother. She enjoyed family visits every weekend and spent time with her children and grandchildren. Her new attorney, Richard Burr, said about her, "The person I saw was kind, sensitive, and loving. There was no hidden agenda with Velma. Whenever you were with her, she was who she was. From what I understand, that's how she lived her life in prison. So, from the very beginning, I believed that when she committed those crimes, it was not the Velma Barfield mentally and emotionally that I was seeing and getting to know. Burr believed that Velma's pre-trial evaluations were inadequate, so he turned to psychiatrist Selwyn Rose. Dr. Rose evaluated Velma in 1980 and testified in the state court. He said that she suffered from 3 disorders: a multiple prescription drug abuse disorder, an underlying personality disorder, and depression. However, Dr. Rose never felt as if he had put together a complete picture of Velma. As Burr had no license to practice in North Carolina, he now assisted Velma's new lawyer, Jimmy Little. As time was running out, Velma's son, Ronnie Burke, asked her if she had killed his father. She replied, "I'm sure I probably did." She couldn't remember clearly, but she believed that she had left a cigarette or a match in the bed and then closed the door, leaving her drunk husband to sleep in their burning house. She also admitted to the pastor who helped her write Woman on Death Row that she had murdered Jennings Barfield. Velma said she was glad that this was finally over because she was afraid that she was going to poison her grandchildren. She didn't know why she did it, but she did it, and it was not something she could stop. North Carolina's governor refused Velma's request for clemency and said that her victims had been literally tortured to death. Additionally, an appeal was made based on testimony from a psychiatry professor who asserted that she suffered from dissociative identity disorder. Professor Dorothy Lewis, professor of psychiatry at New York University School of Medicine and an expert in violent behavior, picked up patterns of manic episodes in Velma's earlier life associated with the development of a manic-depressive disorder. She said she had talked to Velma's other personality, Billy, who told her Velma had been a victim of sexual abuse and that he, Billy, had killed her abusers. The judge responded to this by saying, "One of them did it. I don't care which one." Velma's final appeal was filed on October 30th, 1984, in the North Carolina Supreme Court, based on her being incompetent at her original trial due to her drug addiction. This appeal was denied in federal court. She told her attorney, Jimmy Little, to drop all appeals the day before she was executed, explaining that she wanted to die with as much dignity as the state of North Carolina will allow. Her last hours were spent in reflection and prayer, seeking comfort in her faith. As she was preparing for death, the famous pastor Billy Graham told her over the phone, "Velma, in a way I envy you because you're going to get to heaven before I do." Velma was executed on November 2nd, 1984, at Central Prison in Raleigh. She released a statement before her execution. "I want to say that I am sorry for all the hurt that I have caused. I know that everybody has gone through a lot of pain, all the families connected, and I am sorry, and I want to thank everybody who has been supporting me all these 6 years. I want to thank my family for standing with me through all this, and my attorneys and all the support to me, everybody, the people with the prison department. I appreciate everything, their kindness and everything that they have shown me during these 6 years." As her last meal, she chose a bag of cheese doodles and a Coca-Cola. She received final visits from her family members and friends. She wasn't scared and told one of them, "When I go into that gas chamber at 2 a.m., it's my gateway to heaven." She was wearing pink pajamas for the execution. A stethoscope and heart monitor were taped to her chest. The wheeled gurney was brought to her cell, and she was fastened to it with straps across her body and legs. Then she was wheeled into the execution chamber shortly before 2 a.m. Crowds of pro- and anti-death penalty demonstrators gathered outside the prison. Some of the protesters accused Governor Hunt of refusing to show mercy and compassion, arguing that she could lead a life of value behind bars and help other prisoners. Richard Burr said, "Politics and death have been mixed up in this case." Inmates were banging rhythmically on the windows of their cells, waiting for the execution. About 80 people who were in favor of capital punishment cheered and applauded. The execution was carried out by 3 volunteers. One of the intravenous lines was a dummy, so that none of the volunteers knew which of them actually administered the lethal dose. Velma was declared dead at 2:15 a.m., 15 minutes after being administered the injection of procuronium bromide. Observers at the execution reported that she passed away peacefully, with no apparent suffering or pain. About 300 opponents of the death penalty stood in silent vigil, carrying candles that were extinguished as the moment of the execution passed. At 2:25 a.m., Velma's body was taken to a medical school by an ambulance. She had requested that her organs be used for transplantation. She was buried in a small North Carolina cemetery near her first husband, Thomas Burke. She was 52 years old. Singer-songwriter Jonathan Byrd, the grandson of Jennings Barfield and his first wife, wrote a song about Velma. Do you believe Velma should have been granted a life sentence because of her religious conversion, or did she deserve the execution? And what would your last meal be? Tell me in the comments.